On Halloween night, October 31st, 2012, Rebecca was excited. Her trailer was decorated, her 3-year-old son, Conway, had picked out his costume, and they were all set for a fun evening of trick-or-treating. But when Rebecca didn't show up for work that morning, something that was very unlike her, her friends and fiancé grew worried. They decided to check on her, only to find her car parked in an unusual spot and her favorite handbag, which she never left behind, still in her locked trailer. Inside, things didn't look right. There were signs that something had gone wrong, a few unsettling details that hinted at trouble. As detectives started piecing together what happened, they found out that Rebecca had opened her door that morning to someone she knew well. The events that followed would uncover a shocking betrayal that left her community in disbelief. Rebecca Gay was born on March 26, 1988, in Midland, Michigan, United States. Her parents were a well-respected couple in their community. Thomas, her father, a certified welder and a devout man, was known for his equestrian skills and passion for raccoon hunting. The couple had married on April 3, 1976, and raised 4 children, and they were seen as a close-knit family. Despite this image, Rebecca's parents eventually separated, a transition that proved challenging for everyone involved. Rebecca excelled in high school, showing a clear affinity for her father's love of horses by joining the equestrian team. Known as a kind-hearted and serene young woman, she prioritized family above all. Her compassionate nature was evident through her volunteer work. She even participated in archery events to help raise funds for underprivileged families. As she embarked on her young adult years, Rebecca fell in love, though details about her relationship remained scarce. Around the same time, her mother found companionship with John Douglas White, a newcomer who quickly became central not only to their lives but to the broader community as a local church pastor. Born on May 20, 1957, John had served in the U.S. Navy in his youth and later worked as a long-haul truck driver. By 1980, he was living in Battle Creek, Michigan with his first wife. However, John had a troubled history, including alleged mental health issues that he often cited to excuse violent behavior. During this period, John formed a friendship with 17-year-old neighbor Teresa Morris, inviting her one day to his basement to view an impressive electric car track. Trusting him, Teresa agreed to see it. Once inside, she realized there was no track, and when she turned to ask, John unexpectedly stabbed her under her right shoulder blade. In shock, Teresa saw his sinister grin as he relentlessly attacked her, delivering over 15 stab wounds and strangling her to stop her breathing. John expressed regret in chillingly sexist terms, claiming it was her fate simply because she was a woman. Miraculously, Teresa survived and later identified her attacker, exposing his hateful words during the assault. John was promptly arrested and charged with attempted murder. In court, he attempted to display remorse, admitting guilt and requesting psychiatric help instead of prison time. The judge, however, highlighted Teresa's survival as miraculous and sentenced John to up to 10 years, urging mental health treatment while incarcerated. Prosecutors assured Teresa that John would never harm her or anyone else again, a promise that, unfortunately, Teresa believed. John appealed his sentence, arguing that his defense had not sought an insanity plea due to financial constraints. The court granted a new trial in 1983. Prosecutors then offered a deal. If John pled guilty and agreed to psychiatric treatment, he'd serve only 2 years. He accepted, and by 1985, he was free. Teresa, unaware of the deal or his release, was horrified when she encountered him in public. Though he briefly attended psychiatric sessions, there was no lasting supervision, allowing him to resume a seemingly ordinary life. In the early 1990s, John was employed in maintenance at a textile company. He was married with 2 children and expecting a third, living what appeared to be a family-oriented life. However, he secretly began an affair with a 26-year-old co-worker, Vicky, who mysteriously vanished in July 1994, bringing further shadows to his already troubled past. The search for Vicky began with a chilling discovery from surveillance footage at a grocery store parking lot. In the early hours, around 3 a.m., she was seen entering a black truck driven by a bearded man. Detectives believed this was the last sighting of her, and they quickly started investigating her close connections. Witnesses recalled seeing Vicky that morning, getting into John's truck. Further analysis confirmed the vehicle belonged to him, prompting the police to bring John in for questioning. During the interrogation, John admitted to having a secret relationship with Vicky, but claimed he had dropped her off at home safely on the night she vanished. Weeks passed with no sign of Vicky until a passerby discovered suspicious drag marks in a field. Following the trail, he found white sneakers, a woman's clothing, and trash bags emitting a foul odor. When he moved closer, his horror grew as he spotted a human skull partially exposed among the debris. The man immediately alerted the police, who confirmed the remains belonged to Vicky. Although decomposition limited forensic findings, indications pointed toward foul play, especially since her bra was found around her neck, suggesting it may have been used to strangle her. Determined to solve the case, detectives pressed John to take a polygraph, but he refused. Despite examining his truck, forensic limitations of the era rendered results inconclusive, leaving detectives frustrated. John remained their prime suspect. Days later, he attempted to take his own life by overdosing on pills and alcohol. In a subsequent interview, he confessed to suffering from blackouts, during which he feared he might have committed violent acts he couldn't recall. He speculated he could have hurt Vicky during one of these episodes. Eventually, he faced charges but struck a deal with prosecutors, pleading guilty to involuntary manslaughter. On May 8, 1995, he was sentenced to 8 to 15 years in prison, the maximum punishment possible for his case. During sentencing, he offered an apology to Vicky's family, describing her death as a tragic accident. While incarcerated, John attended therapy sessions, where he divulged disturbing fantasies about harming women and having post-mortem sexual interactions. Despite these alarming confessions, no further action was taken. After serving 12 years, he was released on February 11, 2007, with records indicating he had successfully completed programs for violent offenders. However, his son Gabriel expressed deep concerns, warning in a televised interview that his father was mentally unwell and shouldn't be released. Despite this family warning, John was freed and moved northward in Michigan, finding solace in religion. He settled near Montesano, assuming the role of pastor in a small, tight-knit congregation that came to view him as a reformed man. Soon he began a relationship with Sally, Rebecca's mother, sharing only a carefully crafted version of his past. He claimed he'd once had a minor legal issue, explaining it away as a misunderstanding involving a girlfriend's overdose. This story painted him as a victim of unfortunate circumstances, garnering trust and sympathy from those around him. Sally grew closer to him, even agreeing to a commitment ceremony, while Rebecca continued her life, welcoming her son, Conway, in 2009 at age 21. Though her relationship with Conway's father eventually ended, Rebecca worked hard to provide a loving home for her son. She pursued cosmetology certification and rose to a managerial role in a retail store in Mount Pleasant, securing a stable life that allowed her to purchase a mobile home. By 2010, Rebecca met Aaron Quinn, a supportive partner who brought joy to her and Conway's lives. Her life seemed idyllic. She had a loving son, a home, a successful career, and a supportive family and friends, especially her mother and her mother's fiancé, who became a grandfatherly figure to Conway. However, beneath John's outward persona of kindness and religious devotion, his dark fantasies lingered, hidden from everyone but poised to resurface. On October 31, 2012, Rebecca was eagerly looking forward to Halloween, a holiday that had always held special memories for her. Her 3-year-old son, Conway, had chosen his costume, and she had carefully decorated her home in anticipation. That day, Rebecca, then 24, had arranged to work the morning shift so she could spend the evening trick-or-treating with Conway. However, the day took a troubling turn when she didn't show up for work, highly unusual for her. Concerned, one of her co-workers tried to reach her but couldn't, raising even more alarm. Worried that she might need help, some co-workers and her fiancé, Aaron, went to her home to check on her. Upon arrival, they found the door locked and her car parked nearby in a bar's parking lot. When they asked the bar staff, they were told Rebecca hadn't been there. With mounting concern, they contacted her landlord, who agreed to unlock her door. Once inside, they noticed her favorite purse, a gift from Aaron, left behind, something she would rarely go without. With uncertainty growing, her family decided to report her disappearance to the police. But since she was an adult, authorities held off until 4 p.m., the time she was supposed to pick up Conway. When she failed to show up, they launched a full search. As detectives began investigating her home and car, they found unsettling signs: a red stain on the carpet that had been partly cleaned, and the driver's seat in her car adjusted unusually far back, inconsistent with her small stature. These clues suggested that something serious had happened and that it likely involved someone close to her. Friends and family were baffled as to who could want to harm such a well-loved young woman. Detectives first interviewed those closest to Rebecca, including Conway's father and Aaron. Aaron expressed deep concern, cooperating fully and sharing every detail he could remember. He mentioned that he had spoken to Rebecca the previous night and everything seemed normal, but his messages to her that morning remained unread, suggesting her phone was either off or out of service. Conway's father mentioned that John, the family's pastor, had dropped off Conway that morning, a common Wednesday routine. Following this lead, detectives questioned John, who said he arrived around 6:30 a.m. but claimed he didn't see Rebecca as she was in the bathroom. His story seemed plausible, yet detectives noticed injuries on his nose and hands, which he explained were from a minor accident while fixing his trailer. Despite his cooperative appearance, co-workers reported Rebecca had often shared discomfort about John. Aaron also confided that John had been displaying increasingly obsessive behavior, always finding excuses to be around. With suspicions growing, detectives asked John to take a polygraph. He hesitated but eventually agreed. During the test, He admitted to a criminal history, including an attempt on a young girl's life, though he downplayed the severity. This revelation raised red flags as he offered conflicting versions of his past. When further questioned, John's responses revealed underlying hostility toward women, casting him as the investigation's main focus. When polygraph results suggested deception, detectives confronted him, but he continued to deny any involvement. With the case gaining urgency, investigators obtained a search warrant and found more evidence in his vehicle, including suspicious stains that appeared to be blood and other incriminating items. Yet, John clung to his innocence, even asking his congregation to pray for Rebecca, who was still officially considered missing. Despite his resistance, John's resolve began to crumble. Using emotional tactics, investigators described in graphic detail the decomposition process a body would undergo in Michigan's warm climate. Gradually, he seemed willing to open up, with his defenses cracking under the intense questioning. This tactic proved effective as John eventually broke down and confessed, providing chilling details. Officers who worked on the case later described his confession as a disturbing blend of cynicism and horror. He spoke openly about his unsettling urges, sharing that he'd harbored fantasies of necrophilia and that, in the weeks leading up to Halloween, he had begun experiencing renewed violent sexual desires, specifically targeting Rebecca. He claimed that on October 31st, he felt an overwhelming urge to act on these dark impulses. For the detectives, however, this was not merely a sudden compulsion. His actions showed signs of premeditation and a deep-seated hostility toward women. According to John's account, he arrived at Rebecca's trailer early that morning. Unaware of his intentions, she let him in. During their conversation, he took out a hidden rubber mallet and struck her, knocking her unconscious. While she lay defenseless, he placed a nylon zip tie around her neck, tightening it until she died. He then proceeded to carry out his grim objective of abusing her body. Planning to dispose of her remains, he loaded her into his vehicle. Initially, he intended to leave her at a bar to stage the crime scene but changed his mind, opting to abandon her in a remote ditch among pine trees near a highway intersection. After disposing of her body, John returned to Rebecca's trailer, woke her son Conway and dressed him in his Halloween costume, maintaining a facade of normalcy. He then took Conway to his father as usual, hoping to avoid suspicion. Authorities eventually located Rebecca's body, and a forensic examination confirmed strangulation as the cause of death. Additionally, evidence of sexual assault was found, further heightening the severity of the crime. Although John initially denied the assault, he later claimed he had been out of control and could barely recall his actions. Following his confession, he was given a chance to speak with Rebecca's mother, Sally. In that conversation, he coldly told her she had been the love of his life, hinting that they would likely never see each other again. The sheer brutality and betrayal inherent in John's actions devastated the community. News of his crime shocked those who had once seen him as a respected spiritual leader, unaware of his hidden darkness. The tragedy ignited a broader discussion about flaws in the justice system, particularly the lack of oversight that allowed a man with a violent past to be released without any warning to the public. Many, including his first known victim, Teresa, expressed outrage, feeling the system had failed to prevent a foreseeable tragedy. John's own son Gabriel had previously warned of the danger his father posed, convinced he would eventually return to violence. Amid the outcry, Rebecca's loved ones faced the painful task of saying goodbye. They held a candlelight vigil to honor her memory, followed by a funeral at the Midland Methodist Church. Aaron's mother revealed that he had purchased an engagement ring, intending to propose on Halloween, a day Rebecca cherished. Mourners described her as a young woman with a kind, angelic spirit, always willing to lend a hand. Her friends set up a donation page to cover funeral expenses and establish a trust fund for Conway. On November 8, 2012, John was transferred to the district court for a preliminary hearing to determine if there was probable cause for the case to proceed to circuit court on charges of open murder and first-degree premeditated murder. However, the hearing was postponed to allow for a psychiatric evaluation to determine his competency and criminal responsibility. By early 2013, the evaluation deemed him mentally fit for trial. On January 23, he waived his preliminary hearing, and on March 27, following a plea deal with the prosecution, he pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of second-degree murder, leading to a shorter trial. During the proceedings, prosecutors revealed that John had spent 2 weeks planning Rebecca's murder. According to his sworn statement, John told detectives he had consumed several beers before the attack and had watched adult content featuring violent scenes, including images of lifeless bodies. Officers who were part of the case described his confession as a chilling mix of arrogance and terror. He admitted to disturbing urges, describing fantasies of necrophilia and stating that, in the weeks before Halloween, he had begun to experience violent sexual impulses directed specifically at Rebecca. On October 31st, he said he felt an overwhelming compulsion to act, though detectives believed his actions were premeditated, stemming from deep resentment toward women. According to his account, early that morning, John knocked on Rebecca's trailer door, and, unsuspecting, she let him in. While they talked, he struck her, rendering her unconscious. While she lay defenseless, he placed a nylon zip tie around her neck, strangling her to death to carry out his twisted desires. He discarded her purse, phone, and car keys in a dumpster at the trailer park, while the other items were left near the site where her body was later found. John then drove her car to a bar parking lot nearby to stage the scene, making it appear as if she had been taken against her will. A former long-haul trucking colleague testified about John's behavior, mentioning only one instance of aggression when John verbally lashed out at a Department of Transportation worker over a flat tire. While generally sociable, the colleague described John as a deviant, frequently seeking out sex workers during stops, a behavior he had exhibited even back in their Navy days. After Vicky's disappearance, John had confided in this friend about contemplating suicide, thinking it would spare his family the pain and disgrace of another trial. He said he would wait a week, then have his wife deliver letters explaining everything, though he never followed through. Following witness statements and the arguments from both the prosecution and defense, John's sentencing hearing took place on April 18, 2013. This was an opportunity for Rebecca's family to express their grief. Sally wrote a letter describing her devastation and disbelief at the brutality of the crime and the deep impact of losing her daughter, pleading with the judge to impose the maximum sentence on John. Deborah, Rebecca's sister, urged the creation of a registry for violent offenders like John, stating that if his history had been known, Rebecca might still be alive. After hearing these heartfelt testimonies, John White, then 55, was sentenced to 56 years and 3 months, the maximum allowed under Michigan's plea deal. While a harsh sentence to John and his defense team, Rebecca's family felt it was insufficient given the severity of his actions. However, John once again denied his victims true justice, this time in a more final way. 4 months later, on August 28, 2013, he was found lifeless in his cell. Prison staff attempted resuscitation, but it was too late. The Department of Corrections later confirmed that John, aged 56, had died of asphyxiation by his own hand. John's story is a stark reminder of how individuals with violent histories can exploit plea deals and claims of mental health issues to evade justice, continuing to harm others. His case raises difficult questions about the responsibility of authorities, the monitoring of violent offenders, and how justice systems can sometimes become traps for those they aim to protect. It also underscores the importance of proper prevention and intervention to prevent such tragedies from recurring. Though the system is not flawless, U.S. justice officials have indicated that under current laws, John would have faced longer incarceration, been listed as a violent offender, and his DNA would be included in the national database. With more effective preventative measures in place today, officials hope to reduce the likelihood of similar cases. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.
Every day we coexist with evil. We witness the darkest side of human behavior. The suffering caused by one individual to others is something inherent in our society. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Lucas, and today I bring you another unreal true crime. The case of Maria Fernanda Sanchez. Maria Fernanda Sanchez, also affectionately known as Mafi, was born in the late 1990s in the warm state of Querétaro, Mexico. She was the daughter of Javier Sanchez and Carolina Castaneda, who quickly realized that she would be a source of joy and vitality in their lives. Mafi stood out from an early age, exhibiting an extroverted personality that paired well with her passion for travel, allowing her to easily make new acquaintances. She also had a deep love for music, which added a charming touch to her character. Over time, Mafi discovered the magic of yoga, a discipline that she believed helped connect her with her inner self, bringing her peace that was visible in her appearance and her ever-present genuine smile. Her thirst for knowledge led her to seek out new experiences and embrace every opportunity to learn. Mafi was a diligent student, resulting in a strong academic foundation. She chose to study communication and digital media at the Instituto Tecnológico de Estudios Superiores Monterrey. Her resume was impressive, boasting certifications in video editing and special effects from the Academia Arte C8, as well as digital marketing. From a young age, Mafi demonstrated ingenuity, an innate quality that she enhanced by pouring passion into anything that could elevate her creativity. These favorable conditions made it no surprise that she excelled in digital content creation, photography, and video editing. Mafi was the soul behind Mesh Productions, a small production house she created that reflected her passion for audiovisual production, visible through her social media presence. Her professional journey also included a role as a journalist at a magazine from 2018 to 2021, where she helped to increase the presence and prestige of her alma mater through social media content and contributed to educational note writing for Connecta. Between 2020 and 2022, Mafi interned in innovation and digital marketing at Kellogg's Company, also taking on a leadership role as the director of editing and production at Emporio Estudio, where she worked on projects for well-known companies. In February of 2023, the next chapter of her life brought her to Germany to pursue a master's degree in new media design at the European University of Applied Sciences. Ever enthusiastic to acquire new knowledge and meet new people, Maffei settled in a modest apartment in the Berlin district of Treptow-Köpenick, maintaining her sociable spirit and contagious joy. Despite feeling the impact of the distance from her homeland, she stayed connected with her family through phone and video calls, sharing her excitement about her new experiences and friendships. However, in July of 2023, a post in a group for Latinas in Germany on a well-known social network revealed a sign of vulnerability. Maffei was seeking a Spanish-speaking psychologist as she was going through a very difficult time. Like anyone away from home, although she had chosen to go abroad for personal growth, Maffei was also facing her own challenges. Despite new friendships and adventures in Germany, she began to feel a deep longing for her home, family, and culture. Maffei's life took a dark turn on Saturday, July 22, 2023. Although she had planned to attend the annual LGBTQ community celebration in Berlin, she decided at the last moment to stay in her apartment to work on an academic project. This wasn't out of character for her, as she had always been very responsible, especially when it came to her studies. Despite the allure of the celebration, she chose to fulfill her duties. Just before noon, Maffei spoke with her family in Mexico. The conversation was like any other day, but it turned out to be their last. After this seemingly normal interaction, Maffei left her room in the student residence in Treptow-Köpenick, disappearing without a trace. The following Sunday was unusually quiet from Maffei's end, which seemed strange to her family. They thought she might be busy or resting, but as the hours passed and she didn't respond to her family's regular calls, their worry increased. They tried to remain calm and ward off dark thoughts, but anxiety started to take over. Finally, on Monday, July 24, concern turned into action, and Maffei's family contacted the authorities at the student residences to request they check on her apartment to ensure everything was all right. The state in which they found Maffei's room turned into a perplexing mystery. First and foremost, Maffei was not there, and bizarrely, her cell phone was left on her bed, while the door to the inner courtyard was left open. These details were utterly enigmatic and led the residence administrators to alert the authorities, resulting in an immediate and extensive search. The European University of Applied Sciences, aware of the gravity of the situation, offered its support to the family and closely collaborated with the authorities in the search for Maffei. Through a statement, one of her teachers expressed the academic community's dismay at the student's disappearance and highlighted the coordinated efforts to find her. Concern peaked on July 25 when Maffei's parents, Javier and Carolina, traveled to Berlin, marking the start of an international search. The authorities issued a missing person notice, requesting any information that could shed light on her whereabouts. Although the police considered the possibility that Maffei might be facing emotional vulnerabilities, this theory was discredited by her friends and family, who emphasized that she had seemed happy and normal in the days leading up to her disappearance. Maffei's image, disseminated through a social media account created by her parents named Find Maffei Berlin, depicted a 24-year-old woman, approximately 1.53 meters tall, weighing 48 kilograms, with long brown hair and tattoos decorating her arms. 3 days into an intense mobilization led by Maffei's family, the Mexican embassy in Germany announced its full involvement in the case. A national search protocol was then implemented in a desperate attempt to find the young woman. The Mexican ambassador in Germany used his personal social media account to express his distress and urged empathy and generosity towards those who are far from their loved ones, striving to excel in an environment with a different language and customs than those of their childhood. On July 26, consular authorities announced the implementation of the protection protocol, known as Search for Nationals. This protocol involved coordination between the Mexican and German authorities, aiming to cross-check information from hospitals, schools, and even morgues, with testimonials, persons of interest, and security camera footage. However, nothing seemed to yield results. The search intensified on July 27, when the police began to explore canals and ponds in the region. Equipped with search dogs and divers, the search operations unfolded on multiple fronts, and civil society volunteer groups organized through social media to search for Maffei on streets and in public squares. They distributed flyers and pamphlets with Maffei's image and details, leaving notices in wooded areas and urban spaces alike. Meanwhile, a poster with Maffei's image was shared on social media and spread throughout Berlin, thus multiplying the efforts to find her. As the mobilized public continued their relentless search, additional snippets of information were shared online. According to those close to the young woman, Maffei's room appeared to have been rummaged through before the authorities' arrival. While the police did not confirm this detail, Maffei's father, Javier, shared in an interview that his daughter lived in a ground-floor apartment with a balcony facing the street, and the door to her apartment was inexplicably open. 5 days since Maffei left her apartment, despite the lack of concrete information, the family maintained their optimism and hope. Her father pointed out that they believed the young woman was still in Berlin, as they had not been informed by the authorities whether her passport was among her belongings. On the same day, the family issued a statement thanking Maffei's university and the organized civil society for their support. While they shared their gratitude, they underscored the importance of keeping certain aspects of the case confidential to avoid hindering the investigation. Javier revealed that his daughter had plans to move to Spain in the coming days to meet up with her boyfriend, a young man she had recently met and with whom she was starting a relationship. The boyfriend's solidarity was demonstrated by his travel from Spain to Berlin to contribute to the search for Maffei. Despite the efforts on July 31, the Berlin police reported that they had still not obtained any relevant information that could reveal Maffei's whereabouts, who had now been missing for 9 days. Up to that point, the collected evidence had not shed light on her location, and uncertainty still prevailed. On the same day, Mexican president announced his intention to seek help from his German counterpart to collaborate in the search for Maffei. Days passed slowly as Maffei's family fought to bring visibility to the case of their missing daughter, participating in various interviews to shed light on the baffling situation. In a conversation with a renowned Mexican journalist, Javier, Maria Fernandez's father, shared the challenges they had encountered in the search. He explained that in Germany, due to personal data protection laws, cameras are not allowed to film public places, complicating the tracking of clues. He also revealed the small size of the missing persons department in Germany and how the detective in charge of the case in Berlin faced an overwhelming task. Regarding the Mexican authorities, Javier shared that they had received support and had been offered psychological assistance. The Mexican authorities referred to the case as atypical due to the time elapsed and the circumstances surrounding the disappearance. He added that the family was working on issuing a yellow notice through Interpol, hoping to extend the search beyond the borders of Germany and Mexico. Despite the many tears shed, he said they maintained strength and a positive attitude in their quest to find their daughter amid the difficulties and uncertainty surrounding the case. Desperation and uncertainty lingered as the days passed without news of Maffei. On August 3rd, following exhaustive searches and without encouraging results, Interpol issued a yellow notice for her location practically worldwide. Although authorities considered it unlikely that she had left Germany or the Shenzhen area, this measure reflected the determination to find her. On Friday, August 4th, a spokesperson for the Berlin police shared in an interview with local media that they had verified her possible whereabouts and were closely following up on the received information. However, the lack of details left everyone in suspense. While the Berlin police had gathered up to 120 clues about Maffei's disappearance, concrete evidence that could lead to her exact location remained elusive. Meanwhile, on Saturday, August 5th, the young woman's parents organized a solidarity event in front of the Mexican embassy in Berlin. About 200 young Berliners, dressed in white and carrying lit candles and messages of encouragement, gathered to keep the search alive and show their support for the family. In the midst of this emotional scene, the feared news arrived in the early afternoon. Maffei's lifeless body had been found floating in a canal in Berlin. The search for Maria Fernanda Sanchez had come to a tragic end. Heartbroken, her loved ones confirmed the tragic outcome. Despite the search efforts and the maintained hope, the reality was unrelenting. It was revealed that the student's body had been found by a person walking across a bridge. Although authorities had previously searched the area with divers, it was later explained that the canal was extensive and its waters had hidden the tragic secret. The community gathered in mourning and solidarity, but also to demand answers. The search took a dark turn as it entered a new phase, determining the circumstances surrounding the young woman's death. Meanwhile, the police stated that there was no suspicion of third-party involvement and reiterated that the investigation was ongoing. The Mexican ambassador in Germany shared that the next step in the case would be an autopsy of Maffei to shed light on the causes of her death. Although he assured that the body showed no signs of violence, caution was maintained until the autopsy was completed. In a statement issued by the Mexican Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Embassy of Mexico in Berlin, the Sanchez Castaneda family expressed their gratitude for the support received on both sides of the Atlantic. They especially thanked those who had volunteered for the search efforts and requested respect for their daughter's memory and privacy as they navigated the difficult circumstances of their loss. The painful chapter in the life of Maria Fernanda had come to an end. However, questions still lingered in the air. Pain and sadness spread throughout Mexico as news broke of the tragic end in the search for Maffei. Social media was filled with messages of comfort and wishes for eternal rest for her. Over 24,000 followers joined in a gesture of solidarity, while a feminist collective in Berlin and other volunteer groups also expressed their support with messages filled with love and strength. Politicians from various political streams in Mexico joined in the mourning, sending prayers, solidarity, and condolences to the parents, family, and friends of the young woman. The Secretary of Foreign Affairs in Mexico and current senator trusted that consular authorities would provide support to the family in this difficult time. The discovery of the body marked a new chapter in the investigation. It was known that the German authorities had received more than 120 leads about the young woman, and there were indications pointing to the days before her disappearance. But the situation remained secretive, and if there was any result from that part of the investigation, it is something that has not transpired. Although 2 weeks of intense search involved 500 people and covered more than 3,000 kilometers, there are still unanswered questions. According to Mexican media, the Maffei case brought to light a pending issue for the diplomatic representations of that country in Europe. Attention to mental health. The debate that opened highlighted that adapting to new cultural codes, discrimination, lack of support networks, and insecurity could deeply affect young people seeking a life abroad. The Mexican embassy in Germany reminded of the availability of a free window for access to mental health, while the Secretary of Foreign Affairs of Mexico offered tools a free psychological support platform for Mexicans in France and Monaco. A video shared by friends of Maffei, showing the young woman laughing and singing, reminded of her extroverted personality and all the vital energy that characterized her. That is why they asked for explanations to understand what really happened. On August 7th, 2 days after the discovery, Maffei's parents said that the Berlin police had not allowed them to identify their daughter's body. Sources close to the family confirmed that only the Berlin police had identified the 24-year-old young woman. The police statement reiterated that it could not be assumed that the young woman's death occurred due to the responsibility of third parties, but at the same time warned that the precise circumstances remained unclear. Media speculation was kept at bay, aware of the need to respect the official version. However, the police statement about Maffei's exceptional psychological situation and comments about her mental health raised suspicions about the true intention to investigate what happened to the last consequences. The how and why of her death were mysteries that tormented the Latin American community in Berlin. Attention was focused on the autopsy, a crucial step to dispel speculation. The most recent news occurred on August 9th and was published by a newspaper in Mexico, an informative medium that announced new delays in the autopsy. The newspaper managed to get answers from a spokesperson for the Berlin prosecutor's office, who announced that they would have to wait about 2 months to know the results of the autopsy, and that nothing is certain regarding the date of delivery of the body to the family. She pointed out that the autopsy had been ordered, but that it had not yet been carried out due to the workload and shortage of personnel. She added that it would take about 8 weeks before the result is available. Only from that moment can they think about releasing the body, but perhaps more investigations will be necessary before being able to deliver the remains to the family. The future of the investigation still does not seem to indicate immediate results. The repatriation of the body and the parents' decision on the final destination of Maffei depend on the results of the autopsy. The community cries out for clear answers and definitive closure, while the mystery surrounding the young student continues to weigh on the hearts of all those who followed her story with hope and much anguish. And well, that's it for today's case. As always, I appreciate your support for my work. If you subscribe, like, and share this video, it will help me continue creating content. This was another episode of Unreal True Crime. See you soon. Every day we coexist with evil. We witness the darkest side of human behavior. The suffering caused by one individual to others is something inherent in our society. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Lucas, and today I bring you another Unreal True Crime. The case of Morgan Chantel Nick. Morgan Chantel Nick was born to Morris and Colleen Nick in Ozark, Arkansas, on September 12, 1988. She was the couple's first child, and later, the family expanded with the birth of 2 more children. Morris was known to be a loving and kind father. Those who knew the couple said they embraced their parental responsibilities, doing everything in their power to make life easier for their children. Though Morris and Colleen initially seemed happy, challenges soon surfaced in their relationship. When Morgan was 6, they decided to separate, which ultimately led to a divorce. The process, however, was amicable, and they never fought over the custody of their children. The children primarily lived with Colleen, a devoted mother who always put her children first. Morgan and Colleen shared a close bond, spending most of their time together. Morgan excelled academically, despite her young age. Having just completed kindergarten, her family could already envision her thriving in elementary school. Personality-wise, Morgan was a shy child with a big heart. She loved apples and was fond of cats, leading her mother to allow her to have one as a pet. Despite her shyness, Morgan was actively involved as a Girl Scout and enjoyed playing with other kids. She dreamt of becoming a circus artist or a doctor when she grew up. On June 9, 1995, Colleen received an invitation from a friend to watch a minor league baseball game in Alma, Arkansas. Thinking Morgan might enjoy watching other kids play, she asked her to accompany her to the game, about 30 minutes away from their home. It was a night game, starting at 9 p.m. Upon arriving, the stands were already packed, but Colleen managed to find a spot for herself and Morgan. However, 6-year-old Morgan soon grew bored and began fidgeting with her shoelaces. Despite being a calm child, usually hesitant to engage with strangers, 2 older kids approached her. They introduced themselves as Jessica and Ty, aged 8 and 10 respectively. There are different accounts of what happened next. In one version, Morgan asked her mother if she could play with Jessica and Ty, but Colleen initially declined. Concerned about the unfamiliar surroundings and the packed venue of almost 300 people, Colleen was hesitant to let Morgan wander off. However, Colleen's friends urged her to let Morgan play, assuring her she was being overprotective and that Morgan would be fine. Eventually, Colleen relented. The kids mentioned wanting to run up a nearby hill to catch fireflies. With the game nearing its end around 10:30 p.m., Colleen allowed Morgan to go, but only for a short while. In another version, when Jessica and Ty invited Morgan to catch fireflies, Morgan's innate shyness made her decline. Yet Colleen's friends thought it would be good for Morgan to interact with other kids. Colleen then persuaded a reluctant Morgan to go with them, even if it meant leaving her mother's side. What's certain is Morgan left the stands with the two children. While Colleen tried to keep an eye on them, she got distracted when the baseball game ended and teams came into the stands to greet their families. The next time Colleen looked for the children, she saw Jessica and Ty returning without Morgan. Concerned, she immediately asked them about her daughter's whereabouts. They replied that the girl had disappeared while everyone was emptying sand from their shoes, leaning against Colleen's car. Subsequent investigations revealed that while Jessica and Ty sat at the front of the vehicle shaking out their shoes, Morgan was alone at the back emptying hers. Another significant and worrying detail was that the children insisted they saw a creepy man talking to Morgan before she vanished. Confused and anxious, Colleen immediately raised the alarm, and the adults present at the baseball field helped her search the nearby areas for her missing daughter. However, hours passed in the search without results, and Colleen decided to report the incident to the local police. Those who knew Colleen highlighted her kind nature and how she was always willing to help those in need. Therefore, when she needed support in searching for her child, many showed their solidarity. Additionally, being a devoted mother who always looked out for her children made the community even more outraged at the kidnapper or kidnappers who took Morgan away from her family. On the day she disappeared, Morgan was a beautiful girl with blonde hair and blue eyes. Before going to the baseball game with her mother, she had attended her Girl Scouts activities and was wearing the organization's green shirt, blue denim shorts, and white tennis shoes. Another distinguishing feature of the young girl was that she had 5 silver crowns on her molars, a type of cap used to cover and protect a damaged tooth, which were easily visible. When the police were informed of the disappearance, they immediately began their investigation. Officers and local volunteers organized numerous search mobilizations, while detectives went door to door seeking evidence and witnesses. Since Jessica and Ty claimed to have seen a man speaking with Morgan before her disappearance, the police compiled a detailed description of the suspect, who was said to be between 23 and 38 years old with black hair sprinkled with gray, and he had a mustache and beard. Witnesses also reported seeing a faded red pickup truck nearby with a mismatched white camper shell that seemed too small by a couple of inches. They noticed possible damage to the back right corner of the vehicle. Some claimed the truck had Arkansas license plates, but the plate number wasn't recorded. Additionally, upon reviewing home videos recorded at the baseball field, investigators confirmed the existence of the suspect and the aforementioned red truck. However, unfortunately, the recordings were too grainy to provide a clear image of his face. Once Colleen reported Morgan's disappearance, she called her ex-husband and informed him of the situation. Morris seemed devastated by his daughter's disappearance and expressed willingness to cooperate with law enforcement. Surprisingly, during the initial investigation, the girl's father became a potential suspect as some evidence suggested he acted as a low-level drug dealer. He also reportedly had a criminal history, including assault and property damage charges. From the beginning of the investigation, Colleen was willing to cooperate with law enforcement in every way because her only wish was for her daughter to return safely. However, when investigators initially suspected Morris, her ex-husband, of being involved in Morgan's disappearance, she felt the police were making a grave mistake. She defended him, claiming he would never harm their children. Fortunately, the police soon ruled out Morris as a person of interest and focused their attention on Clifford Joe Pullen, rumored to be his drug supplier. This individual had a criminal record, and in addition to being arrested for marijuana possession, he had also been charged with first-degree rape of a minor in 1995, suggesting he might be capable of kidnapping. Nevertheless, authorities quickly cleared Clifford of any suspicion and stated he was not involved in Morgan's disappearance. Although the police received numerous leads at the time, none led to Morgan, and months, and then years went by. During this period, information from Albert Harvey, a resident of Stuttgart, Arkansas, seemed promising. He claimed he had seen a man fitting the suspect's description with a blonde child trying to enter his truck. Interestingly, Albert was able to identify the suspect from the sketch, and the police used all their resources to scour the area. However, as hours went by without any leads, law enforcement began to doubt his claims. They subjected Albert to 2 polygraph tests, which he failed, and he eventually admitted to lying. The case went cold, and as time passed, the search was no longer for a 6-year-old girl, so the existing photos of Morgan seemed insufficient. To provide a solution, in February 2001, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released an age-progressed photo showing what Morgan might look like at 12 years old. The intention behind such photographs was to widely disseminate an updated image of Morgan. This way, if someone spotted a teenager resembling the image, they could alert authorities to verify if she was the girl abducted in 1995. Leads in the case were dwindling. Although police vowed that they wouldn't stop working the case until they found Morgan, the trail was growing cold. Searches would continue to be held sporadically, and detectives still followed up on every tip they received, but nothing brought them any closer to finding Morgan. The next lead came in January 2002, when a tip led investigators to search a property in Logan County, Arkansas. A witness claimed that Morgan was buried there. This testimony was so detailed and specific that the police acted on it. However, despite using search dogs and scouring the area thoroughly, nothing was found. On August 14, 2005, ABC's Extreme Makeover, Home Edition, and John Walsh, co-founder of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, addressed the topic of missing children, highlighting Morgan's abduction. Colin and Morgan's siblings received a new home after their family home was damaged by a water heater explosion. In November 2010, federal investigators searched a vacant house in Sparrow, Oklahoma, after receiving a tip from a confidential informant. Sparrow was about 25 miles from Alma, and the property they searched had once belonged to a convicted child molester who was currently in jail. Although investigators had nothing linking the man to Morgan's disappearance, they searched through the home looking for possible DNA evidence that might indicate Morgan had been there. Unfortunately, they didn't uncover anything related to the case. In August 2012, 2 convicts, identified as Tonya Smith and James Monhart, were accused of trying to buy some of Morgan's personal documents, including her social security number and birth certificate. While they were found guilty of document forgery, investigations determined they weren't involved in Morgan's disappearance. On December 18, 2017, police conducted another search on a property in Sparrow. Some reports said it was for an unrelated investigation, while others believed it was connected to Morgan's case. Notably, the search dogs signaled to a well on the property, which then became the focus of the search. After an intense 24-hour search, investigators left the property without finding any evidence. In November 2021, detectives identified Billy Jack Links as a potential suspect in Morgan Nick's abduction. An Arkansas resident, Billy was a registered sex offender who had been in and out of prison since 1992. Reports suggest he had a typical upbringing, with no apparent signs of deviance. He served in the U.S. Army during World War and later worked for an airline in Dallas before returning to Arkansas. Despite seemingly staying out of trouble, he was arrested and charged with sexual offenses in 1992. 2 months after Morgan's 1995 disappearance, Billy attempted to kidnap an 11-year-old girl only 8 miles from where Morgan vanished. Witnesses reported he drove a red pickup truck, aligning with descriptions from Morgan's case. A week after Billy's arrest, investigators searched his truck, finding hair, fibers, a mesh sheet, rope, a tarp, insulation tape, and blood on one of the seats. The samples were stored for future analysis, but it's unclear if they were tested then. Shortly after his arrest, Arkansas State Police and the FBI tried to question him about Morgan's case, but he invoked his right to an attorney and refused to talk. Regarding the 11-year-old he tried to kidnap, Billy proclaimed his innocence, but he was convicted of sexual solicitation and sentenced to 6 years in prison in 1995. Billy remained behind bars until his sudden illness and death on August 5, 2000. In 2021, a news channel aired a documentary titled Still Missing Morgan. Arkansas police mentioned they were still seeking information about the red truck with an attached white cabin. The documentary led to over 200 new tips, but none have resolved the case. The revelation about Billy Jack Links was the last major update, but Morgan's disappearance remains an active investigation, with the police continuously receiving tips. Meanwhile, Colleen pleads with law enforcement to follow every lead, refusing to rest until his daughter is found, hoping for her safe return. This case has profoundly impacted Arkansas and even influenced the naming of the Amber Alert. The Amber Alert system began in 1996 after the disappearance of Amber Hagerman in Arlington, Texas. Amber is an acronym for America's Missing Broadcast Emergency Response, managed under the Department of Justice. The Morgan Nick Amber Alert is Arkansas's name for the program designed to alert the public when a child goes missing. This program is a joint effort between local law enforcement, media outlets, and civic groups to raise awareness about potential abductions, thereby increasing the chances of locating the missing child. Activating the Morgan Nick Alert involves the participation of all Arkansas law enforcement agencies, along with more than 250 local radio stations, TV networks, and other media outlets. This information is quickly disseminated to all parties, enabling them to broadcast details about a possible abduction widely. As of 2023, the case remains unsolved. Since Morgan's disappearance in 1995, her father, Morris, has opted for privacy, preferring not to discuss his daughter's case publicly. In contrast, Morgan's mother, Colleen, is vocal about her ongoing efforts to bring Morgan home. Colleen lives in Alma, Arkansas, where she runs the Morgan Nick Foundation, assisting families dealing with abductions or missing persons. Beyond advocating for these families, Colleen spreads awareness about daily dangers faced by children and offers detailed resources to help parents and teachers understand online safety basics and parental control apps. Despite extensive investigations that have yielded thousands of leads, there is still no concrete information on Morgan's whereabouts. The FBI and local communities have offered a reward of $60,000 for information leading to the recovery of Morgan Nick and the identification, arrest, and conviction of those responsible for her kidnapping. Thank you for supporting my work. Please subscribe, like, and share this video. See you next time on Unreal True Crime. Goodbye. Every day we coexist with evil. We witness the darkest side of human behavior. The suffering caused by one individual to others is something inherent in our society. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Lucas, and today I bring you another Unreal True Crime. Ta'ir Rada's story. Ta'ir Rada was the pride and joy of Shemuel and Ilana Rada, inhabitants of the peaceful Katsrin, a short distance from Haifa in Israel. She grew up with her older siblings, Roy and Ohad, who were always watchful and caring towards her. Ta'ir's vivacious spirit, love for the arts, and talent in dance made her stand out. Her friends fondly referred to her as their guiding star. Naturally, Ta'ir's charisma meant she led and others were inclined to follow. Though her beauty and wit sometimes brewed jealousy among other young girls, any rifts were generally short-lived since many of these girls had been friends from childhood. Ta'ir's daily life included attending a local high school, and like many kids in her neighborhood, she preferred walking to school. It was her routine to call her mother upon reaching home, a reassuring habit for the family. However, on the fateful day of December 6, 2006, things took a turn. Skipping her last class to mingle with her friends, Ta'ir was her usual self, blending in and enjoying the camaraderie. Around 1:20 p.m., she got really thirsty, so she went to the school building to get a drink. Some younger students recall seeing her on the floor where the 10th grade classrooms were located. However, at night, when the usual call didn't come that evening, her mother grew anxious. Initially dismissing it as a simple delay or a visit to a friend's house, worry soon set in when Ta'ir was nowhere to be found. Her family tried calling her many times on her phone, but she didn't pick up. This made them worry and feel very sad. Lilana's motherly instincts screamed that something was wrong. Without a second thought, she mobilized a search party made up of relatives, friends, acquaintances, and even strangers, all rallying to find Ta'ir. Shemuel, in sheer desperation, joined the search, navigating through the cold, dark streets. The level of distress and panic among Ta'ir's family was palpable. Nobody had seen her since she went into the school earlier, so the police were quickly sent to the school to start looking for her. At around 7 p.m., a group mainly comprising the Rada family's close circle ventured into the school. They searched through the dark hallways and rooms until they got to the girls' restroom for 10th graders. There, they found something unsettling. One of the restroom stalls had its door locked. They saw feet inside, but when they called out, there was a spooky silence, and nobody responded. They used a nearby stall to help them look over, and what they saw was beyond belief. Ta'ir was lying there, not alive, and it was clear that something terrible had happened to her. The walls and floor showed signs of something really scary. She had injuries that were proof of a violent attack, and it was clear that her last moments were filled with fear. The shocking discovery deeply shocked the whole community. Shemuel, who was in a lot of pain, couldn't get close to the crime scene because of how horrifying it was. Ta'ir's brother was so upset that he had to be held back. Everyone in the community was really upset and angry. They couldn't understand how something so terrible could happen in a place where children were supposed to be safe. Parents were worried about their kids' safety and talked about whether it was safe to send them back to school. For a while, the school became a place where a crime had happened, and all the normal classes and activities had to stop. People were confused because the police were searching in a wider area instead of concentrating on the school, which is what the locals thought they would do. The police were talking to people to find out where Ta'ir had last been. 2 people who knew her said they saw her go up the school stairs by herself, without anyone following her. Many students reported being in the restroom around the same time frame as Ta'ir, with several pointing out peculiar occurrences. In the span of 40 minutes, an estimated 10 to 12 girls used the restroom. Yet the police chose to interview only a handful. What struck investigators as particularly odd was how amidst this constant traffic, no one seemed to have witnessed or heard the violent act that took Ta'ir's life. Some students noted anomalies, like the presence of an unfamiliar girl with curly hair. One of Ta'ir's friends, who was confident she knew most of the student body, couldn't recall seeing this girl either before or after that day. Although the mystery girl wore a school shirt, she was perceived as a new student. A specific student claimed to have observed 2 sets of feet in the stall where Ta'ir was later found. Ta'ir's recognizable sneakers and another pair of youth-sized all-stars. She, however, dismissed this observation, attributing a foul odor in the restroom as a reason to leave quickly. Another student, after knocking on the stall's door, was informed it was occupied. The police seemed especially interested in discerning the gender of this voice. Even though she repeatedly mentioned it was a female's voice, she felt the officers were unsatisfied with her response. With the whole community offering their help and sympathy, the Rada family was going through a very sad and difficult time, trying to understand that they had lost Tadir. Haim Sadovsky, a private investigator, was really moved by Tadir's case, especially because his own daughter was the same age as Tadir. He got in touch with the Rada family and offered to use his skills to help them. They were thankful and told him everything they could. Ilana mentioned a peculiar observation. When a group of Tadir's friends visited to offer condolences, two girls seemed to be having a secretive conversation, prompting Ilana to think they might be withholding crucial information. Haim investigated further, finding numerous inconsistencies in their police statements. Interestingly, one of Tadir's classmates went to look for her bag in class, but didn't find it strange that Tadir wasn't there. Another classmate mentioned that Tadir seemed unusually distant during her favorite class, theater. When her teacher asked what was wrong, Tadir's response was really unsettling. "Because I fear death." This made a lot of people wonder if Tadir had a feeling that something bad was going to happen to her. When they looked into it more, Tadir's friends shared a really disturbing story. They talked about an 18-year-old from Tiberias named Avi who seemed to be fixated on Tadir. He kept calling and texting her a lot, and he even made a really scary threat. He said he would harm her if she didn't agree to be in a romantic relationship with him. Avi made Tadir even more anxious by insisting on meeting her, and when she said no, he threatened her with harm again. But upon police investigation, there was no evidence to corroborate any interactions between Tadir and this supposed stalker, Avi. This brought up an important question. Why would Tadir's friends come up with such a story? Could it be a way to distract from something else? Haim Sadovsky, during his investigation, reasoned that the extreme violence inflicted upon Tadir didn't seem characteristic of an adult assailant. An adult wouldn't need to exert such brutality to overpower a young girl. He postulated that the culprits were likely two individuals, roughly Tadir's age and stature. Aside from the two girls who were previously suspected, there was another person Tadir knew who caught their attention. This girl was similar to Tadir in terms of looks and intelligence, but they had a noticeable dislike for each other. Tadir had told her mom about her concerns regarding this person at the beginning of the school year. What's interesting is that this girl left town not long after Tadir's death, and when the authorities asked her about students leaving town, she avoided giving a straight answer. Despite initial suspicions pointing towards Tadir's classmates, the investigation did not yield any DNA, fingerprints, or shoe imprints as evidence. Authorities then shifted their focus to a gardener employed at the school. His presence in the teacher's lounge on the fateful day, combined with his seemingly disoriented demeanor, as noted by the school psychologist, made him a person of interest. But the school's gardener had a strong alibi that made it hard for the police to connect him to the crime. Even though the psychologist's statements seemed believable, the police were stuck with a lot of uncertainties and not enough answers. Then, in a surprising turn of events, the investigation started looking at someone else who looked very much like the school's gardener. This led investigators to believe that the school psychologist could have mistakenly identified the two. Roman Zadorov, a construction worker at the school, found himself under the investigative lens shortly after Tadir's murder. A recent immigrant from Ukraine, Zadorov had relocated to Israel 2 years prior and was earning a living through miscellaneous construction jobs. He had met his wife, Olga, back in Ukraine, and the two were high school sweethearts. His family made the move to Israel, where he was then employed as a handyman for a contractor. Due to visa restrictions, Zadorov wasn't legally allowed to work, so he was compensated in cash. At his wife's urging, Zadorov had initiated the process of acquiring Israeli citizenship during the time of his arrest. He wasn't fluent in Hebrew and mostly communicated in Russian. The police's suspicion was aroused when Zadorov revealed that he had discarded the clothes he wore on the day of Tair's murder. During the long hours of his interrogation, while denying any involvement in the crime, investigators scoured his residence. They unearthed pornographic content on his computer, which, upon closer inspection, involved young but legally aged women. Further amplifying suspicion was Zadorov's collection of knives, especially given the nature of Tair's injuries. Zadorov's detention was based on the circumstantial evidence of the knives and the school psychologist's potentially mistaken testimony. Adding to the tension was the media's reporting of unverified information, claims that Zadorov's DNA matched that found at the crime scene. This, however, was not accurate. While DNA samples were indeed sent to the U.S. for testing, the results were pending. The interrogation tactics took a contentious turn. Authorities missiled Zadorov, stating that his DNA was present at the crime scene in an attempt to extract a confession. Although Zadorov initially resisted, he was pressured into thinking the evidence was undeniable. He speculated that perhaps he inadvertently stepped in blood he had noticed in the school's male restroom, thus explaining any potential trace. After this grueling questioning, he was placed in a holding cell, suggesting further developments in the case were imminent. Something surprising happened. Zadorov's cellmate turned out to be working with the police. They promised him a lot of money, and even more if he could get Zadorov to admit to the crime. But Zadorov didn't give in. He kept saying he didn't do it, especially because he had just become a father and didn't want to lose his family. But after more than a week, the informant tried a different approach. He made Zadorov believe that the evidence against him was really strong, and his best chance to get a shorter prison sentence would be to admit to a lesser crime like manslaughter. That way, he might spend less time in jail. Under significant pressure, and with the informant's guidance, Zadorov was led to believe that he might have acted in a fit of uncontrollable rage, a side effect of feeling marginalized as an immigrant in Israel. Zadorov started doubting his own memory, pondering over past incidents where he acted out and later had no recollection of the event. Eventually, he mused, "Maybe I did kill her. If everything points towards me, perhaps I did it." Yet inconsistencies remained. Zadorov recalled working late on the day of Tair's murder and wasn't covered in any blood. His discarded trousers, which had been a point of suspicion, were thrown away due to their uncomfortable fit, not any purported bloodstains. Without Zadorov knowing, his talks in the prison cell were being recorded. Taking advantage of Zadorov's growing uncertainty, the investigators convinced him to act out what happened during the crime at the school, and they recorded everything on video. The authorities thought this was the proof they needed. Later, in a press conference, they said they had caught Tair's killer and suggested that a small argument over cigarettes had made Zadorov react violently. However, Tair's family and friends challenged this narrative. They desired more concrete forensic evidence. They felt in their core that Zadorov wasn't the actual perpetrator. Their skepticism was compounded by the police's claim regarding the cigarette altercation. Tair was known to detest smoking and was unlikely to insult anyone, especially someone older than her. Tair's mother, Ilana Rada, was persistent in her belief that the real killer came from Tair's circle of friends. Over the years, she gathered information, growing increasingly convinced that there were unsettling dynamics within Tair's close group of friends leading up to her tragic death. Ilana, while digging deeper into the school's culture, found some disturbing information. She thought that a lot of students might be part of a satanic group, and she started thinking that Tair's death could have been a part of a ritual. As the investigation continued, Roman Zadorov's wife got in touch with their legal team. After they did their own investigation, they came to the conclusion that Zadorov was being blamed for something he didn't do and had been manipulated into confessing. Zadorov quickly recanted his confession, yet remained incarcerated awaiting his trial, which commenced on July 2, 2007. The prosecution's narrative took a dramatic turn. They suggested that traumatic childhood experiences from Ukraine were triggered when Zadorov began working at a school, leading to an explosive reaction when provoked by the students. They also misleadingly stated that DNA evidence tied Zadorov to the crime scene, even though the results from the U.S. had not been received. The defense, however, dismantled the prosecution's claims one by one. Despite the crime scene being dense with various pieces of evidence like blood, hair, and footprints, not a single trace linked Zadorov. His residence was scored extensively, even his washing machine, but yielded no ties to the crime. 3 hairs on Tair's body matched 3 different individuals, none being Zadorov. 60 fingerprints found at the site didn't match him either. Moreover, Zadorov's timeline for the day provided him with a reliable alibi. His whereabouts were confirmed by various people at different times, ensuring he was nowhere near the crime scene during the estimated time of Tair's death. The prosecution relied a lot on Zadorov's confession, even though it had many mistakes. When they reenacted the crime, it didn't match up, and it seemed like the police were telling him what to say. They said Zadorov knew things only the real killer would know, but the defense argued that the investigators actually told him all those exclusive details. When Zadorov was asked to show how certain parts of the crime happened, he kept getting it wrong, and the officers had to help him until his answers matched the evidence. Furthermore, the nature of Tair's injuries suggested they were inflicted by a left-handed individual, while Zadorov was right-handed. The multiple inconsistencies in Zadorov's confession raised significant doubts about its authenticity and the integrity of the investigation. Zadorov's confession had a lot of inconsistencies, and the defense team pointed them out clearly. He said he used a knife with a smooth blade, but the forensic evidence showed that the weapon had a serrated edge. To make things more confusing, during the reenactment of the school, Zadorov took the officers to the wrong restroom. The actual crime scene was easy to spot because there was still crime scene tape there, which was a pretty big mistake. Also, when Zadorov showed how he escaped from the restroom cubicle, it didn't match the evidence at the crime scene. He said he jumped over the cubicle door, but the footprints suggested that the killer climbed over the neighboring cubicle instead. Prosecutors argued that a bloody footprint at the scene matched Zadorov's specific shoe brand. However, this claim lost weight given that no blood was found on his actual shoes. Considering the violent nature of the crime, it seemed improbable that he could be present in the cubicle without his shoes being splattered with blood. Despite these glaring inconsistencies and the lack of concrete evidence linking him to the crime, Zadorov was found guilty and handed a life sentence. The court labeled his statements as deceitful, adding charges of obstructing a police investigation. After the trial, Tair's mother initially believed Zadorov was the perpetrator, swayed by his confession and the supposed footprint evidence. Yet, in the ensuing months, her conviction wavered. Ilana Rada soon went public with her distrust in the legal system and voiced suspicions towards students at Tair's school, even suggesting a satanic ritual might be involved. Refusing to accept the verdict, Zadorov's defense team remained undeterred in their pursuit of justice. Further muddying the case's credibility was a scandal involving the presiding judge, who later resigned due to charges of indecent offenses against minors. Public sentiment started to shift towards Zadorov, with many voicing their support for his innocence and demanding justice for Tair. In 2016, a documentary, Shadow of Truth, spotlighted the case and introduced a harrowing confession from an anonymous individual. He recounted a chilling admission from his ex-girlfriend, referred to as AK, who confessed to Tair's murder. This former student of the same high school confessed to wearing the school's uniform, lying in wait, and killing Tair in a ritualistic manner. This confession eerily aligned with earlier police testimonies from a student. Ak's backstory further darkened this narrative. She had a traumatic childhood, which included witnessing extreme violence and being concealed in a wolf's corpse for warmth. These experiences led her to have disturbing fantasies about violence and blood, to the point where she became obsessed with them. After Tair's murder, AK supposedly told her lover all the gruesome details of the crime, even showing them her blood-soaked clothes and the murder weapon. She went into great detail about what she did and what happened afterward, and it strangely matched what investigators had already found. Bringing back these unsettling claims and stories only added to the complexity and uncertainty of the case. In the dark aftermath of Tair's murder, AK stayed close to the lifeless body, hiding until it was safe to leave. She managed to slip away without anyone noticing, changing out of her blood-stained clothes and getting clean ones before making her escape. Once she got home, she cleaned herself up and disappeared from everyone's radar. Roman Zadorov's defense team was eager to probe deeper into the account relayed by AK's ex-boyfriend. They subjected him to 3 lie detector tests, all of which he passed without any signs of deceit. This prompted the police to arrest AK, a striking blonde woman who vehemently denied any involvement in Tair's killing. AK shifted the blame to her former lover, accusing him of both harboring bloody fantasies and physically assaulting her. Things took a really unsettling turn when AK, who was on house arrest, tried to harm her current boyfriend. When he rejected her, an intoxicated AK threatened him with a piece of broken glass. Luckily, people nearby stopped her from carrying out the attack. When the police arrested her, AK suddenly had a scary change of heart and confirmed the horrifying things her ex-boyfriend had told them before. Even though AK was found unfit to go to trial for the attempted murder and was sent to a mental health facility, no formal charges were filed against her. On the other hand, her ex-boyfriend had to deal with charges of obstructing justice and indecent assault while he was in prison. While he was behind bars, the authorities made him a proposition. If he took back what he had said about AK's involvement in Tair's murder, they would drop his charges. He strongly and dramatically refused, even threatening to take his own life, while insisting that AK was responsible for Tair's tragic death. The tragic murder of Tair Rada not only took away a young, promising life, but also shattered the lives of those who loved her. The passing of Shemuel Rada, Tair's father, in January 2016, further added to the family's anguish. During Shemuel's final farewell, Ilana read his heart-wrenching words, calling Shemuel a king soon to be reunited with his queen. Tair underlined the depths of her pain. And amidst her own overwhelming grief, she expressed her own yearning to join them. Yet, the story continued to unfold. The discovery of new forensic evidence in 2018 threw a wrench into the case's perceived conclusions. The matching DNA of a hair found on Tair's body to the man who had earlier made revelations about AK muddied the waters even more. It raised pressing questions. Was he the true perpetrator, or had he been speaking the truth throughout? His proximity to AK during the murder, and the fact that criminals often immerse themselves in investigations added layers of complexity. In 2019, Zadorov's attorney Yoram Halevi filed a request with the Supreme Court for a trial, claiming the existence of a lot of new evidence that proves unequivocally that Zadorov did not murder the deceased and could not have murdered the deceased. In a dramatic ruling in perhaps the most famous murder case in Israeli history, Roman Zadorov was acquitted on March 2023 of the 2006 murder of a 13-year-old schoolgirl that horrified the nation, in a retrial that overturned previous convictions that saw him serve more than a decade behind bars after being sentenced to life. The panel of 3 judges at the Nazareth District Court announced a 2-1 decision to exonerate Zadorov, who burst into tears and later said, "The truth triumphed. I am happy. I was confined to my home. Now I will take my children for a stroll." Judges Asher Kula and Danny Sarfati acquitted Zadorov, while the third judge, Tamer Nissim Shai, ruled that he was guilty. The verdict is some 700 pages long. A representative of the state prosecutors in the case said her team would study the verdict and then decide whether to appeal the acquittal to the Supreme Court. At the end of the verdict reading, Judge Kula turned to Ilana Rada, the victim's mother. "We tried to solve the mystery, but it is possible that Tair took her secret to the grave," he said. Delana Rada answered. At last, after 16 years of lies, justice was served. The war is just beginning. This is a cover-up by the prosecution. The prosecutors of the State of Israel murdered my daughter, she added, reiterating her past accusations that the poor investigative work and alleged framing of Zadorov had been tantamount to murdering her daughter all over again. While at the moment no one has been charged for Tair's murder, we hope it will happen in a near future. For more heart-rending tales and true story crimes, remember to subscribe and like. Stay respectful in the comments, especially considering the grieving families. Until next time on Unreal True Crime, stay safe and good night. Every day we coexist with evil. We witness the darkest side of human behavior. The suffering caused by one individual to others is something inherent in our society. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Lucas, and today I bring you another unreal true crime. The case of Leah Sousa. On June 7, 1977, the state of Ontario, Canada, witnessed the birth of Leah Sousa. Leah's life began with her strong and determined mother, Laura Sousa, who, despite being a single parent, left no stone unturned in ensuring her daughter's well-being. For a considerable time, their world was just the two of them, journeying through life's highs and lows together. As time unfolded, Laura introduced Leah to her new baby brother, Michael. The identity of their father remains undisclosed to the public. While some believe that a father figure was missing from their lives, the addition of Michael brought a sense of completeness to their family. Living in Cumberland Beach, Ontario, a quaint region about 2 hours away from Toronto, the Sousas had a humble abode with a combined living and kitchen area and a single bedroom. But this didn't deter Leah's spirit. She grew into a radiant young girl with a lively sense of humor and zest for life. Leah's academic achievements and her roles as a doting sister and daughter made her family immensely proud. At the age of 13, the Sousa family decided to visit Laura's sister, taking a rejuvenating 6-week summer break. With the Canadian school year commencing the Tuesday after Labor Day, they were soon back in Cumberland Beach, gearing up for the upcoming academic year. As the 1990 Labor Day weekend approached, Leah was eagerly preparing for her impending high school journey. On the night of September 1, while she rested on the couch, Laura and baby Michael slept peacefully in the bedroom. But that tranquility was shattered when, between 1:30 and 3 o'clock a.m., an unknown individual forcibly entered their home. Initially, the intruder brutally attacked Laura, using a metal object to inflict severe head injuries. He then turned his attention to Leah, assaulting her inside the house before dragging her to the backyard for further violence. The following morning, a friend of Leah's grew concerned after failing to reach her by phone. She decided to check on her, cycling over to the Sousa residence. The horrific sight she discovered was beyond comprehension. Leah's lifeless body lay in the backyard amidst a scene of devastation. The police were immediately alerted, and upon arrival, they found Laura grievously injured but alive. The silver lining amidst the tragedy was that young Michael remained untouched and unaware of the nightmare that had taken place. Laura was rushed to a Toronto-based hospital, where she spent 3 challenging weeks recuperating under tight security, fearing the perpetrator might return. The extent of her injuries required multiple surgeries, leading to the insertion of metal implants in her skull and cheek. One eye was severely damaged, resulting in lasting issues like impaired vision, dizziness, and diminished hearing. The brutal attack on Leah and her mother, who miraculously survived, profoundly shook both law enforcement and the residents of the rural community. In a place where people once led peaceful lives, leaving doors and windows open and letting children cycle freely without any fear, panic began to permeate the air. Parents became hesitant to let their children play outdoors, preferring to keep them close and in sight. Locking doors, securing windows, and keeping weapons nearby for self-defense became commonplace. In fact, out of sheer fear of a nocturnal assault, many residents started keeping a weapon or tool close to their beds. The palpable fear was evident on the faces of the community members. Investigators tirelessly worked to shed light on the events and identify potential suspects. Even though various samples were collected from the crime scene and inside the home, they couldn't find the assailant's DNA. Neither the weapon used in the crime nor the bloodied clothing the perpetrator wore during the attack was ever found. One key clue emerged: a footprint from a size 9 or 10 Nike tennis shoe made of leather. It was believed that Laura might have seen the attacker, but due to her injuries, she could not recall any events from that night. Investigators theorized that the individual who took Leah's life might have been familiar with the family and their vulnerabilities, noting their secluded living area and the absence of a male figure in the household, a single mother with an infant and a teenage daughter. Furthermore, detectives hypothesized that the attacker knew the region well, possibly being a resident or a frequent visitor, and was aware that the family was alone that particular night. One person of interest identified was Brian Timothy Elson from a nearby town. 4 months after Leah's tragic end, Brian took the life of 17-year-old Sandra Bannister in a place less than 13 kilometers from where the Sousa family lived. While Brian denied any involvement, the police suspected he was in Cumberland Beach on the night of the assault on the Sousa household. However, after questioning, he was released. He was never charged for Leah's murder, but pleaded guilty to manslaughter in Sandra's case, serving only 6 years in prison. After his release, due to concerns about his potential threat, the courts allowed the police to monitor his movements for 3 years, though this led to no further developments. As the authorities persisted in their investigations, Laura grappled with the gaps in her memory. Eager to recall the events of that fateful night, she tried various methods, including hypnosis and the controversial use of sodium pentothal, commonly known as truth serum. However, these attempts were in vain. Later, she turned to a renowned expert in brain science in Ontario. He attempted to stimulate Laura's damaged right brain hemisphere with magnetic fields to retrieve memories. Sadly, this effort also failed. He explained that human memories don't instantly solidify. Experiences take 20 to 30 minutes to permanently store in our brains. Unfortunately, during Laura's attack, this critical window was lost. He compared it to shutting down a computer without saving, suggesting that the memory might be lost forever, a heartbreaking outcome for Laura. In 2008, Ontario Provincial Police launched a billboard campaign along the highway near the Sousa residence, seeking new leads on Leah's case. This initiative yielded some promising testimonials. That same year, an intriguing tip led to an extensive search for the murder weapon on a wooded property in Cumberland Beach. However, the search came up empty, and Leah's case remained unresolved. In 2010, marking the 20th anniversary of the crime, the news program ran a feature on Leah's case. During their investigation, they found out that Brian's grandmother, a person of significant interest in the case due to her association with another similar attack, lived on the same street as the Sousa at the time of the incident. Brian was reportedly staying with her during that period. When a reporter located Brian at his home and questioned him about the assault leading to Leah's death, he denied any involvement. He claimed he was at a party in another town that night, where 60 witnesses could confirm his alibi. Over the decades since the murder, more than 1,500 people have been interviewed by the police. The quest for answers in Leah's tragic case continues. On one occasion, Laura spoke to the media, expressing her growing concerns that the case might never be solved. However, she maintained hope that one day she would come to know what transpired and why. The grieving mother pleaded with the community not to forget her daughter, even though she couldn't remember the events of that fateful night. The haunting memories continued to torment her, and she wasn't the only one scared by the tragic events of the summer night in 1990. Officers who investigated Leah's case, along with the journalists who covered it, acknowledged the horror that continued to grip them. By 2020, an investigator of the Ontario Provincial Police, the last in a series of investigators who had been on the case since Labor Day 1990, described the brutality as off the charts. He stated that both mother and daughter, deep in sleep, stood no chance against the attacker as they were ambushed and severely beaten. At that point, he revealed that the police believed a pipe or an iron wrench might have been the weapon used by the assailant. Yet they held back further investigative details to avoid jeopardizing the case. Regrettably, as the years since Leah's assault and the severe injuries inflicted on her mother Laura passed, the mystery of that night remained unsolved. More than 2 decades after the incident, the police reiterated that there were individuals who had information about the events and could potentially help solve the case. Despite a reward offer of $50,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the perpetrator, that crucial piece of evidence never materialized. Still, they encouraged anyone who believed they had even the slightest information to come forward. Jim Van Allen, a criminal profiler with the Ontario Provincial Police, had studied around 850 fatal assaults before retiring in 2010. He dedicated significant years of his career trying to understand the motives behind heinous crimes and how to prevent them. When discussing Leah's case, he stated that while all violent deaths are tragic, some, like Leah's, are unforgettable. To Jim, the crime scene, which looked like a dollhouse in a tidy 60 square meter space without a basement, suggested that the attack was personal and intimate. Given that the family had only recently moved in and only locals knew they were home, he surmised that the aggressor was local and likely acted alone. In Jim's analysis, the intruder, equipped with a metal tool to break a window pane, likely had a sinister plan for the night. The level of violence exhibited indicated the act wasn't just a random outburst, but rather a manifestation of deep-seated sadism. Jim hypothesized that the assailant, already predisposed to violence, might have been at a personal breaking point, possibly under the influence and driven by a lifetime of resentments. He pondered if the man had a recent argument or felt particularly humiliated that day, suggesting past humiliations could have acted as a trigger for his rage. The profiler believed that the attacker might have known Laura and been interested in her. However, as a single mother, she would have been out of his league, like many other women. Jim's analysis suggested that while the intruder was likely known in the community, he wasn't particularly well-liked, leading women to instinctively fear him. From Jim's assessment, while criminals typically flee their localities after committing heinous acts, he felt Leah's assailant might have remained nearby. Perhaps he cleaned his stained clothes and discarded the metallic instrument. The attacker's potential financial constraints and limited resources might have dictated this choice. Though not exceptionally astute, the culprit had the cunning to remain silent. In Jim's professional estimation, this person showed no regret for Leah's untimely death and likely felt indifferent about Laura's fortunate survival. But all these speculations and years of persistent investigation couldn't bring them any closer to the elusive perpetrator. In a twist in 2014, Barry Rule, an ex-officer of the Ontario Provincial Police with 3 decades of service, unveiled a book named A Viable Suspect: Multiple Murders and the Limits of a Police Force in Canada's Most Noted Unsolved Mystery. Barry's narrative raised suspicions about a serial criminal, dubbed Larry Talbot in his writings, connecting him to Leah's demise and other similar incidents in southwest Ontario. A personal encounter with this man named Larry in 1971 was recounted by Barry, wherein Larry trespassed and assaulted his fiancée. This attack was thwarted by Barry, who noticed the intruder's method of entry, breaking a rear window, resembled the approach at the Sousa residence. Larry, known as a traveling salesman in southwest Ontario, had his vehicle inspected, revealing a rape kit. Yet, regardless of Barry's insights into recurring patterns, Larry escaped intense scrutiny and passed away without ever being a legally recognized suspect. Even as Barry's book garnered attention, it didn't decisively resolve the cases hinting at Larry's involvement. Commemorating the 25th year of Leah's tragic end in 2015, Laura echoed sentiments of profound sorrow and exasperation, mourning the stolen potential of Leah's life. Investigators, over the years, left no stone unturned, pursuing leads, deploying multimedia investigations, revisiting evidence, and meticulously studying the comprehensive case files, among the most voluminous in police records. With the belief that someone local held the key to unlocking Leah's murder mystery, the police broadcasted a plea for information, spotlighting a $50,000 reward. Leah's mother lamented that even after years, she couldn't recollect the events of that devastating night. The knowledge that clues about the identity of the assailant responsible for Leah's tragic end were locked away in her memory was tormenting. Driving past the house became a somber task for many in the community. Paul Peden spoke about the profound impact this incident had on their lives. Even though he never knew Leah personally, the chilling details of her fate left him and his peers deeply shaken. Parents became overly cautious, restricting their children's outdoor activities. In a time without the rapid information spread of social media, whispers of fear propagated through the community. A new detective took over the case in 2019, and he has been diligently collaborating with experts from similar past cases. The case file, vast and complex, demanded exhaustive scrutiny to uncover any overlooked evidence. Though he didn't divulge specifics on whether they believed a single individual or multiple were involved, he emphasized the continual re-examination of evidence from 1990. Thanks to modern forensic methods, even after over 30 years, the brutal demise of Leah Sousa remains an unresolved mystery. The collective efforts of the community and law enforcement have yet to bring the perpetrator to justice. This harrowing case serves as a grim reminder to the community about the imperativeness of vigilance and unity. Authorities, meanwhile, are unwavering in their quest for justice. Leah's memory remains etched in the community, continually underscoring the importance of justice and safety for all. That concludes today's narration. Your support is immensely appreciated. If you resonate with this content, please subscribe and share. This was another episode of Unreal True Crime. Until next time. Every day we coexist with evil. We witness the darkest side of human behavior. The suffering caused by one individual to others is something inherent in our society. As dedicated investigators of the criminal world, we're on a mission to uncover the most shocking crimes and get inside the minds of those who commit them. I am Lucas, and today I bring you another unreal true crime. The West Memphis 3 case. On May 5, 1993, the weather was perfect in the small town of West Memphis, located in Crittenden County, United States. The 3 8-year-old friends were getting ready at their homes to go out and play. The boys had met at Weaver Elementary School, and what brought them together was the local scout group, where all 3 had reached the rank of novice scouts. First, there was Stevie Edward Branch, born on November 26, 1984, the son of Stephen and Pamela Branch. His parents had divorced when he was young, and later his mother married Terry Hobbs. Years later, the family expanded with the birth of his younger sister. Stevie was about 4 feet 2 inches tall, weighed around 64 pounds, and had dark blonde hair. He was an honor student with a promising future, but at that moment, he was just a child. That day, he put on a white shirt and blue jeans, left his house on his black and red bicycle. Second was Christopher Byers, born on June 23, 1984, to parents Melissa DeFeer and Rick Moore. His parents divorced when he was just 4 years old, and shortly after, his mother married John Mark Byers, who adopted him, along with his 13-year-old brother, creating a new family. Christopher was the smallest of the group, standing at about 4 feet, weighing around 51 pounds, and had light brown hair. His physique matched his personality. He was very sweet and innocent. He wore blue pants, dark shoes, a white long-sleeve shirt, and headed to his destination. The group was completed with Michael James Moore, born on July 27, 1984, to parents Todd and Dana Moore, and he had an older sister. Michael was the leader and stood out for his strong personality. He was about 4 feet 2 inches tall, weighed around 77 pounds, and had brown hair. Before leaving, he put on blue pants, a Boy Scout shirt, and a cap from the same organization. He liked wearing the uniform even when he wasn't at Scout meetings. He was a real enthusiast. He rode on his green bicycle to meet Christopher and Stevie. The three boys headed toward the Robin Hood Hills, where they played all afternoon. Around 6:30 p.m., Christopher's stepfather started calling them to come home, but he only heard the echo of his own voice in response. After half an hour of waiting and growing anxious, Mark Byers decided to go to the police station to report the three boys missing. Although the authorities began a search, it had to be limited because it was already very dark, and the trees covered the entire area. Nevertheless, families and neighbors carried out their own search until dawn, but they could not find any trace of the three children. At the break of dawn the next day, the police started a more comprehensive investigation, led by the search and rescue personnel of Crittenden County. They searched every corner of the forest, but they could not find even a single clue. Around 1:45 in the afternoon, just when they thought all hope was lost, they reached the Robin Hood Hills, the wooded area where the boys had last been seen. Officer Steve Jones spotted a black shoe floating in a creek, leading to the largest drainage channel in the hills. He alerted his supervisors, and they acted quickly, searching the area downstream of the ditch. There, they encountered the most shocking sight of their lives. The lifeless bodies of the three children were at the bottom of a lake, having been tied hand and foot with their own shoelaces. Their right ankles were tied to their right wrists behind their backs, and the same was done with their left legs and arms. The horror did not end there. Both Michael and Steve had bruises all over their bodies. Christopher, on the other hand, had bruises and abrasions on various parts of his body, as well as cuts on his private parts and bite marks. However, this was not of particular attention to the detectives. No one could understand the magnitude of the crime. It had been perpetrated with a cruelty that transcended human limits. At the bottom of the same muddy ditch, wrapped around sticks, they found the children's clothing. Most of the garments were inside out, as if they had been hastily removed. Something that particularly caught the detectives' attention was that the underwear of two of the children was nowhere to be found, and one pair of pants had traces of fluid, leading to speculation about a possible motive of sexual assault. However, before drawing any conclusions, they had to wait for the forensic analysis. The case was just beginning. The investigation process was hindered because the officers had removed the bodies from where they were found before the forensic scientists arrived to conduct the pertinent studies. The crime scene was contaminated, as the chief of police was continuously smoking, throwing cigarette butts into the ditch. The autopsies indicated that Christopher died from multiple wounds that caused him to bleed out, while Stevie and Michael died from drowning in the ditch. The autopsies indicated that Christopher died from multiple wounds that caused him to bleed out, while Stevie and Michael died from drowning in the ditch. The hypothesis of sexual abuse was discarded because the studies showed that the wounds were the result of a knife attack, and there were no signs of sexual abuse on the bodies of the minors. Speculation began about the possibility that the children had been attacked somewhere near the woods and then murdered in the ditch. Christopher's autopsy stood out from the rest. He was the only victim with drugs present in his system, specifically Ritalin. While the boy took the medication daily due to his attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, the dose found in him corresponded to a level higher than that indicated by his therapist. The details emerging from the case were increasingly disturbing, and the townspeople grew more and more anxious, exerting pressure on the police. They were desperate for a quick resolution and a culprit to blame. Suddenly, it seemed as if a light had been shown on a potential suspect, a teenager who seemed to fit the criminal profile. His name was Damien Eccles. He was 18 years old and had a substantial record of minor offenses, such as vandalism and theft. He had dropped out of high school and had been institutionalized due to mental health issues. The police, who had been speculating for some time, saw him as the perfect scapegoat. Eccles was always attracting too much attention with his heavy metal band fandom, his interest in pagan religion, his dark clothing, and his black hair, making the townspeople feel scandalized whenever they saw him. His family, being from a lower social class and having had interactions with social services on several occasions, was also known to the police. On May 7, 1993, Eccles was interrogated for the first time. He denied knowing the 3 murdered children or having anything to do with the case. He even agreed to a polygraph test, which suggested that he was innocent. However, prejudices persisted, and there was no concrete evidence against him. Despite this, the media and the entire town had already deemed him guilty. Public opinion alone was not enough to close the case. The manager of Bojangles, a local restaurant, contacted the police for the second time that week. After seeing the case on television, he believed there might be a connection to an incident that had occurred at his restaurant on May 5th, near where the bodies were discovered. At 8:40 p.m. on the day of the children's disappearance, he had called the West Memphis Police Department to report a strange incident. A man with brown hair had entered the restaurant, covered in blood, with muddy feet, a bruised arm, and appearing disoriented. He had then gone into the women's bathroom. A few minutes later, the man left the restaurant, and the employees discovered blood smeared on the walls of the bathroom. Officer Regina Meek responded to the call, speaking to the manager through a drive-through window. She didn't seem particularly concerned about the information and left without checking the bathroom. After the manager's second call, Detective Bryn Ridge and Sergeant Mike Allen returned to the restaurant, this time with a more proactive approach. They collected scrapings of the blood from the bathroom wall, but did not bother to question the other employees about the incident. The scrapings were never sent to a crime lab for analysis and were later declared lost. The lead was dismissed because the prosecutor argued that it was completely absurd to think that the person who committed the murders and took great care to hide the bodies, clothes, and bikes of the children would enter a public place covered in blood. Moreover, the injuries would have made it very difficult for one person to have killed all 3 boys alone. The police were desperate for someone to bear witness to the crime that they believed Eccles had committed. They interrogated Jesse Miskelly Jr., a 16-year-old with a mental disability, for 12 hours without the presence of his parents or an attorney. After numerous twists and turns, Miskelly implicated himself, Eccles, and Jason Baldwin in the crime, despite not having any connection to Eccles. However, his statement was inconsistent with the forensic evidence, as he described the boys being tied up with an industrial rope, whereas they were actually bound with their own shoelaces. Within a few hours, Miskelly retracted his statement, even providing an alibi that he was in another town watching a wrestling match on the night of the murders. But it was too late. The police had what they needed: 3 perfect suspects, capable of creating 3 distinct knots to subdue the victims, just as the crime scene suggested. The media frenzy that ensued portrayed the 3 suspects as guilty, further fueled by the satanic panic phenomenon sweeping across the United States at the time, where heinous crimes were often associated with devil worship and the resurgence of cults. The West Memphis authorities crafted a strong narrative against the 3 young men, labeling them as outcasts who had committed the murders as part of a satanic ritual. When Eccles' home was searched, a book with a pentagram on the cover was found. The police saw this as sufficient evidence to claim that the three teenagers were involved in a black magic cult, shaping the narrative they wanted to impose on the public consciousness. People began to come forward claiming they had seen Eccles near the crime scene. Detectives managed to interview two girls aged 12 and 15 who claimed they had heard Damien confess to the murders. An anonymous statement claimed to have seen Eccles covered in mud on the night the children disappeared. However, the real lead was provided by a woman named Vicky Hutchison. She said her son Aaron, who sometimes played with the three young victims, had seen strange things in the woods. Nonetheless, her statement was dismissed due to its lack of solidity. Vicky didn't give up and provided a second statement in which she claimed to have seen the teenagers performing a ritual, which later turned into debauchery, on the same night the victims disappeared. She alleged that the teenagers had abused the boys. However, there was no evidence of this on any of the bodies, and her testimony was extremely odd. Vicky committed to gathering more evidence and invited Damien to her home for a conversation. She hid a microphone and recorded every second of their talk. However, the young man didn't say anything that could be used against him. Frustrated by the lack of evidence, the police stated that the tape was inaudible, but didn't prove Eccles' innocence under any circumstances. Both he and Jason were arrested on June 3 of that same year. Jesse Miskelly Jr. was tried separately from the other two accused, providing several statements that did not match the facts narrated by the prosecution. The trial was heated, and an expert on false confessions stated that the young man had suffered from police coercion. They had taken advantage of his mental condition to tell him a version of the crime, and he ended up believing it. However, none of this was taken into account when delivering the sentence. On February 5, 1994, Miskelly was convicted of 1 count of first-degree murder and 2 counts of second-degree murder. Although he avoided the death penalty, the judge sentenced him to life imprisonment plus 40 years. The trial of Eccles and Baldwin was as scandalous as their companions. Evidence used included Stephen King books, black metal band flags, and song lyrics written on the walls of the accused rooms. The verdict was emphatic. The young men were part of a satanic cult and had murdered the children to carry out a ritual. Fibers and a knife found by divers in a lake behind Baldwin's house were also presented as evidence. However, it couldn't be proven that any of these items belonged to the accused youths. It was circumstantial evidence, and they were not given the right to appeal. Much of the evidence that the defense attorneys hoped to present was excluded by the judge. Eccles was sentenced to death by lethal injection for being the mastermind of the crimes, while Baldwin was sentenced to life imprisonment. When asked if there was any reason why the sentence should not be pronounced, Baldwin reaffirmed his innocence. Eccles, completely devastated, shook his head. The execution date was scheduled for May 5, 1994, but nothing was that simple. For the victims' families, the sentence had been handed down too quickly, and there were unresolved issues, which began the most mediatic part of the case, attracting the attention of the most unexpected figures. The young men were already known throughout the country as the West Memphis Three. The case aroused the interest of several prominent figures in the music world, whom Eccles and Baldwin listened to. Among them was Pearl Jam's lead singer, Eddie Vedder, who helped raise money for their legal defense. Natalie Maines, the lead singer of the Dixie Chicks, also joined the cause of the trio. The metal band Corrosion of Conformity included a song inspired by the case called Free the Three in their album Wise Blood. But it wasn't just musicians who were part of the media defense. The young men also received support from Johnny Depp and several film directors. In 2007, with significantly more advanced technology, new DNA tests were conducted. These tests showed that there was no trace of the three accused on the bodies of the children. The bite marks also did not match any of them. Most shockingly, the results suggested the presence of other individuals at the crime scene. A hair found on one of the shoelaces of Michael Moore was consistent with the DNA of Terry Hobbs, Stevie Branch's stepfather. Hobbs had a criminal record and was known in the town for having a long history of mistreatment, including assaulting his wife, allegations of hitting minors, and attacks on neighbors. Another hair found near the crime scene on a tree stump was consistent with the DNA of a friend of Hobbs, named David Jacoby. Both claimed to have been together on the night of the murders. Hobbs emphasized that he believed the guilty parties were already behind bars. However, 3 witnesses presented sworn statements claiming they saw Hobbs with the children on the night they disappeared. The police did not initiate legal actions against him, but the media did. Peter Jackson, the renowned director, began producing a documentary with the goal of reconstructing the events, pointing at Stevie's stepfather as the murderer. New testimonies were collected. Jo Lynn Mackay, Michael Moore's mother, claimed she saw Hobbs washing clothes on the night of the murders, presumably to clean mud off his clothes. Additionally, a cherished pocket knife belonging to Stevie, which he almost always carried with him, was later found among Hobbs' possessions. Finally, and perhaps most damningly, 3 young men claimed that a nephew of Hobbs told them his uncle had been the murderer, but it was a family secret. Opinions among the victims' families began to diverge. The stepfather of Christopher Byers started to suspect Hobbs, even calling him a child murderer. However, Todd Moore believed that the evidence against Hobbs was not convincing. He pointed out that his son spent a lot of time at Stevie's house and could have easily picked up a hair with DNA on his shoelaces on one of those occasions. The tipping point came with the reappearance of Vicky Hutchison, who admitted that she had agreed to collaborate with the police in exchange for a $30,000 reward. She was supposed to provide false information to implicate Eccles. This revelation indicated it was time to redeem the West Memphis Three. In 2010, 17 years after the crime, the Arkansas Supreme Court ordered that the DNA evidence must lead to a new trial. The West Memphis Three reached an agreement with the prosecution, adhering to the Alford plea, which allowed them to assert their innocence, while acknowledging that the prosecution had enough evidence to convict them. On August 19, 2011, they were released on a suspended sentence of 10 years, after having spent 18 years in prison. However, they remain on probation and could be incarcerated again for more than 21 years if they reoffend. The procedure allowed the accused to freely express that they are innocent, even though their official record still lists them as guilty. In interviews given after their release, Baldwin stated that he had been reluctant to plead guilty to crimes he did not commit, but he did so to spare Eccles from the death penalty. Although the families of 2 of the victims came to believe that the trio was innocent, a spectator shouted "murderers" at the 3 as they left the courthouse. It would be very difficult to undo the scandal that the West Memphis police had constructed. In a press conference, the 3, now adults, stated that their main concern was clearing their names. In 2013, a new version of the story emerged from Billy Wayne Stewart, a self-confessed drug dealer, and Benny Guy, a convicted felon. The story was not firsthand, but had reached them through Buddy Lucas, a teenager from the town. On May 5, 1993, Buddy had gone out with Terry Hobbs, David Jacoby, and his friend John Mark Byers to buy marijuana from Stewart. They then got into Hobbs' truck and drove around the city, smoking and drinking whiskey. They reached a wooded area, and at that moment, Hobbs asked the 2 teenagers to get out and fight while he and Jacoby watched in a fetishistic act. It was unclear whether this led to any intimate activity. During the course of that afternoon, Christopher Byers, Michael Moore, and Stevie Branch appeared on their bicycles. Upon realizing they were witnessing something they shouldn't, they decided to leave, but it was too late. Hobbs shouted at his companions to stop the boys, while Jacoby hit one of them. That's when the attack occurred, resulting in the mutilation of Christopher's genitals. The other boys had seen too much, so they decided to kill them all. The clothing and bodies of the boys were collected and dragged to the water, and their bicycles were thrown into the swamp. According to Stewart, when he tried to call the West Memphis police investigator to tell him Buddy Lucas' story, He didn't even bother to return the calls. These statements are public knowledge, but the case remains closed. It is unclear if the authorities prefer to leave the case as a collective myth rather than seeking true justice for the victims and their families. And well, that brings us to the end of today's case. As always, I appreciate your support for my work. If you subscribe, like, and share this video, it will help me continue creating content. This was another Unreal True Crime. See you soon. The case of Jessica Gutierrez. Jessica Gutierrez, warmly known as Jessie by her family, was born on December 3, 1981, in the United States. She was the youngest amongst her three siblings. The family lived in a modest mobile home located in the rural area of South Carolina. In 1983, the tranquility was disrupted when Jessica's parents divorced. The children were left in the full custody of their mother, Deborah, while David Gutierrez, their father, moved to Mexico, maintaining a transient lifestyle between there and California. Following the divorce, Deborah worked diligently, finding employment at the United States Postal Service to meet the needs of her family, ensuring their well-being despite the challenges of raising 4 children alone. In June of 1986, Deborah found herself entangled with a man whose behavior grew progressively controlling and problematic, exacerbated by his increasing alcohol consumption. Eventually, his behavior reached a tipping point, leading to his expulsion from Deborah's life and home. However, Deborah's hope for respite was short-lived as her life plunged into further darkness. On June 5, 1986, a seemingly typical early summer day unfolded in South Carolina. The weather was pleasant, with temperatures hovering around 30 degrees Celsius, clouds ornamenting the sky. The family spent their day indulging in outdoor activities and nurturing familial bonds. The day concluded with Deborah preparing sandwiches for dinner and painting Jessica's nails before the children were put to bed. Jessica, maintaining her usual habits, requested to sleep in her mother's bed, a request granted by Deborah. However, when her elder brother experienced discomfort and pain later in the night, Deborah allowed him to sleep in her bed, relocating Jessica to the room at the hallway's end beside her sister, Becky. The following morning, Deborah awoke to a scene of subtle chaos, marking the inception of her ordeal. The front door was ajar, the family dog wandering restlessly, and a set of curtains lay on the floor, with the mosquito net appearing to be forcibly removed. Jessica was missing. Her absence was accentuated by Becky's ominous statement attributing her disappearance to a man with a magic hat and beard. A state of panic ensued as Deborah combed through every conceivable hiding spot, hoping to find Jessica playing hide and seek. Her efforts were futile, leading her to frantically search the surroundings of her home, eventually reporting Jessica missing at 9 a.m. The ensuing investigations by the Lexington County Sheriff's Department revealed no signs of a struggle nor any missing items from the house, apart from the papers scattered on the bedroom floor. The conjectures pointed to a potential kidnapper entering through the back window, abducting Jessica without waking her, and exiting through the front door. Search operations extended to the neighboring woods and abandoned structures in the predominantly rural area of Red Bank, especially rural back in 1986. The speculations, searches, and Becky's consistent statement about the man with the magic hat continued to haunt the family, embodying the relentless pursuit of truth and justice in the light of such grim circumstances. They searched many woods and areas with small streams and ponds for Jessica. Searches were made using off-road vehicles across large areas filled with nature. The sheriff's department sent a plane to fly over the area, hoping to find some trace of the girl, but none of the searches were successful. Deborah was taken to the sheriff's department to answer questions about what happened in the last 24 hours. She insisted she didn't know what happened to Jessica, but was sure about who did it. She blamed her ex-boyfriend for taking Jessica, but he said he didn't know where she was. The police also looked into Jessica's father, who was in California at the time. No charges were made against them. On June 7, the FBI and South Carolina law enforcement joined the search. Bulletins were sent nationwide. This was 10 years before the Amber Alert system and way before the internet era, so communication between departments could be slow and cumbersome. The sheriff's department tapped Deborah's phone to monitor all incoming and outgoing calls in case someone called with ransom demands. The police told reporters they believed Jessica was taken from the mobile home and didn't walk away on her own. Weeks into the investigation, the detectives only had one physical clue found at the home. A fresh fingerprint was found on the open window at the back of the house, believed to be the point of entry on June 5. The fingerprint was sent to the FBI, but no matches were found. In September 1986, the sheriff in charge announced they had a suspect but didn't have enough proof to charge him. The suspect had failed a polygraph test, but since those aren't admissible in court, it wasn't enough for an arrest. After this, there were few glimmers of hope in the following years. In 1987, police in Kansas contacted the Lexington County Sheriff's Department, saying they had a girl matching Jessica's description. Deborah flew to Kansas hoping to see her daughter, but it wasn't Jessica. Deborah returned to South Carolina, determined to keep Jessica's case alive. She and the sheriff often disagreed about the case and argued over the investigation. Deborah decided to conduct her own investigation and keep Jessica's case in the public eye. In June 1989, Deborah told the state newspaper she had found fibers in an abandoned car connected to a family friend serving time in North Carolina for assault. This was a major revelation. 2 years earlier, Deborah had received a letter from an inmate in North Carolina claiming his cellmate had confessed to abducting and killing a 4-year-old child in 1986. The cellmate, Thomas McDowell, was a registered sex offender living in Lexington County at the time of Jessica's disappearance and was known to the Gutierrez family. Thomas claimed he had killed Jessica because she recognized him and said he had thrown her body into a landfill. Thomas also said he had a beard and was wearing a tall cowboy hat at the time of the abduction. Thomas' cellmate not only informed Deborah but also contacted the police with this information. This led investigators to extensively interrogate Thomas, who agreed to disclose every detail about the crime to the detectives. However, he demanded immunity in exchange. Of course, it wasn't a deal the state was willing to make, so he remained in prison in North Carolina, and Jessica's case officially went unresolved. Deborah felt frustrated and angry. In 1989, she told the state newspaper that it felt like they had no rights and that the system wasn't working for the victims. She was particularly upset that no charges were brought against Thomas. After all, he had confessed, and his version matched the events of June 5. But there was something even more surprising. Thomas's fingerprints were taken and found to match the fingerprint found on the Gutierrez family house window. In 2007, 21 years after Jessica's disappearance, Deborah publicly criticized a Lexington County Sheriff's Department and accused them of mishandling her daughter's case. She said that for years she had been afraid of what would happen if she dared to contradict the sheriff, a powerful figure in South Carolina. But after 2 decades, she wanted the case to move forward and knew she needed media attention to achieve it. Local news had access to a recorded telephone call between Deborah and the sheriff in June 1986, just a few days after Jessica's disappearance. In the call, recorded by the sheriff's department's wiretapping unit, Deborah argued with him about the case, concerned and demanding answers as he was pulling investigators off the search. The sheriff replied that he would give answers when he had them, and then threatened to pull all his agents off the case and send them home if she interfered with him. Of course, Deborah was angered by the sheriff's response, viewing it as a threat to her daughter's case. She asked him what the people who elected him would think if he abandoned Jessica, and he responded that they could elect him or not because he didn't really care what they did. In 2007, when the call transcript was made public, the sheriff said he remembered that Deborah had accused him of favoritism and not handling the case properly, and it had hurt his feelings. Deborah also expressed her frustration with prosecutor, indicating that she had been trying for years to get other agencies to take over the case, but he had not allowed it. The case was even reviewed by the prosecutor in 2007, but no action was taken to charge or prosecute any suspects. When consulted about it, he stated that most of the evidence was inadmissible, and the little that could serve had an explanation and a reasonable doubt. He also said that without a body, the state would need much more evidence to secure a conviction. After this, the case fell back into obscurity, but its main protagonists were generating their own headlines. In 2014, Sheriff James Metz was charged in federal court with 10 counts of bribery and wire fraud, for which he was sentenced to 12 months in prison. In 2016, prosecutor Donnie Myers was arrested for driving under the influence after crashing his car into a utility pole and abandoning the vehicle. He was fined $1,000 and retired from public service in 2017. In 2021, 35 years later, the case sparked renewed interest. Sheriff Jacob, who was elected to office after James went to prison, announced that the county would collaborate with the FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team to take a new look at Jessica's disappearance. In January 2022, finally, there was a breakthrough in the case. Police arrested 61-year-old Thomas Eric McDowell in connection with Jessica's disappearance. The subject, whom the child's mother had always suspected, was considered a person of interest in the case but was never followed up on. He resided in Lexington County in 1986. He was arrested at his home and confined to the county detention center. After the arrest, Thomas was charged with murder, kidnapping, and first-degree burglary for the disappearance and death of Jessica Gutierrez. Based on the arrest warrant media outlets have accessed, authorities identified a fingerprint of the suspect at the victim's house. However, it was not disclosed where the fingerprint was found or when it was identified as belonging to Thomas. Regardless, Deborah was aware of the existence of this fingerprint for years, and it was discovered on a window. For her, this was conclusive proof that he committed the crime, as she cleaned her windows every night, and only Jessica's kidnapper would have touched the glass afterward. In the same arrest warrant mentioned, authorities stated that the man was later identified in a photo lineup, and they also had evidence against him that he had told others he had kidnapped and killed the girl. After revisiting the case in 2021, special agents from the FBI and state prosecutors visited the area. Law enforcement agents from South Carolina assisted in interviewing over 125 people. The investigation was extensive, with over 3,500 pages of records reviewed, and 10 FBI field offices were involved in reviewing Jessica's case. The official statement indicated that the arrest was made possible thanks to many years of dedicated investigative work by local, state, and federal partners, as well as the determination of citizens who never forgot Jessica. Jessica's body has never been found, but perhaps this time, the subject will cooperate with authorities about the facts and disclose the location of the little girl. Deborah Gutierrez is still alive, but the long years waiting for answers have taken a toll on her. Her mental health has been affected by her daughter's disappearance, and this time it was Jessica's sister who spoke on her behalf after learning about the suspect's arrest. She said that her family never thought this day would come. She added that her mother fought tirelessly for 36 years for justice for Jessica, praying not only for a conviction, but also for the death penalty. She expressed gratitude on behalf of her family to everyone involved in the arrest of the man whom she described as an evil monster. Paradoxically, Thomas's neighbors considered him a quiet and reserved person who transported his work materials in a van and didn't seem to be a violent individual. Unfortunately, they will have to wait until the trial to find more answers. Apparently, Thomas has not admitted to the crime and has not disclosed what he did to Jessica. And that's the case for today. As always, I appreciate your support for my work. If you subscribe, like, and share this video, it will help me continue creating content. See you in the next episode of Unreal True Crime. See you soon.